Welcome again, everyone. Jerry's Old Guy Review, and I'm back. So I apologize for my slight hiatus between, well, let me just say, this time of year, when the snow goes away and things start to green up. That is one of my busiest times of the year, and it didn't help that we had the addition of 8 new friggin' mouths to feed. We're down to 5 now, but we'll cover the babies later. So right now, what I wanted to talk about, because of my hiatus, I have been working and listening to YouTube videos, crawling videos, and the thing is Element's new IFS 2 system. Now, for those of you who have followed the channel since the beginning, I've always been an IFS guy. But not for the reasons that everybody now is jumping on the bandwagon about. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to break IFS down in the real world, not the RC world. The RC world is full of misconceptions. IFS is not for a die-hard crawling vehicle. IFS, in my opinion, is for somebody who really wants to do something different, increase their driving skills, because inevitably to drive an IFS vehicle in a crawling situation well is going to improve your driving. You are going to be able to pick lines better, but it depends on how much knowledge you have with the vehicle you have. Now, I am also going to show some of the early IFSs, which, I have 2. One of them is the OG, and the other one, it is the most realistic for a true IFS system on the market. It's harder to get now, but we'll cover that in a second. So what I have on the bench is the Element RC original IFS system. And I have a TF2, TF2. I have an Axial SCX-10-2. And what I've done for this example was I switched the wheels. So I'm basically kind of tinkering with both of these. So right now, the Element is sitting on 4 3/8 inch tires, and the Axial is sitting on the 3 7/8 inch wheels that come on the Element. So looking at the difference, we're looking at straight axle pumpkin clearance, which, let's see here, pretty close to my red tag. And then the IFS system, which, again, similar. Let me back up for a second and explain an IFS system. The IFS system consists of A-arms, control arms, so that the front moves independently, independent front suspension. Independent front suspension basically replaced solid axle in real vehicles because of stability and control. When they did that, they were wanting to take their straight axle vehicles and they wish they handled better at high speeds on the road. So in the crawling world, An independent front suspension has generally been put on high-speed vehicles. Better control, soaks up the bumps, the wheels move independently of each other, so there can be a lot of, say, washboard action on the road. But for crawling, you want this front end to clear things. And generally, what do? You put on bigger tires. That's what you do. Independent front suspension, as in this example, so I put bigger tires on them, way bigger tires. And, oh, look, that front end still has the same ground clearance under load. And then you go to the IFS. So you've got ground clearance until you start hitting bumps. So the center changes. And that's not good for crawling. But now, if you're picking and choosing your lines with your calibrated eyeball now, you can make this truck, it's never going to perform as well as a straight axle. But you can, with, say, we got the weekend warriors that come out with all these one-to-one trucks now. You get suspension lifts, you have bigger A-arms, you have additions that you add to your struts, because these vehicles in real life don't have shocks on them. They have struts. So you get a lift kit and it lowers the IFS, or the bigger A-arms raises the IFS up. You know, there's so many, but you spend thousands and thousands of dollars. What Element did was make everything beefy from the get-go. It still makes me giggle because I love this truck. Because of the IFS vehicles, this one is the most capable. It's got the bigger A-arms, but when you look at the truck overall, you know, the front end is bigger than, in scale terms, than the rear end, because they beefed it all up. This front deal is a little bit, you know, beefier than I would have liked to seen for this, what they were doing, but it's accurate. You have to have these mounting points somewhere. So that is the biggest thing I see, is that there are people that are like, you know, this thing's worthless, you know, it doesn't perform like a rock crawler should. Well, it's not a true rock crawler. But if you embrace it for what it is, you will become a better rock crawling driver. I mean, that's just, you're going to have to, I find it hard myself, even with my dedicated trucks. You know, I'm eyeballing a line, and I'm like, okay, I can get up that line. And then lo and behold, I missed, you know, 1/2 inch piece of rock that was sticking up, and it slams right in the front diff, and I got to back up and redo it. Now, with the IFS, your eyeball's going to get a little better. And my biggest thing with the IFS straight axles was to see what it can do. This is my premise with everything. You know, people ragging on the IFS systems, people ragging on ready to runs. You know, oh, I got to replace everything right off the bat. No, take it out, see what it does. I can guarantee almost everyone who hasn't driven an IFS system, if you are a diehard, you know, rock crawler, you know, you go to competitions, you do this, you do that. If you covet a challenge, that's where an IFS crawler comes into the mix. because you are going to inevitably, don't just drive it once and say this thing's crap. See what it can do, and then you go from there. Element with this little project I'm playing between the two of these trucks, I'm going to cut up that trail runner body. Is that what that's called? Wait a minute. Yep, trail runner. I'm going to cut up that body so I can put the bigger tires on it. It's not going to be these Nitto trail grabbers, horrible tire. But I'm going to put something different on it, and I'm going to raise it up a little bit, and then we're going to go out and have some fun with it. Because, it is already fun. From those of you who watched the original video, it took forever, but I finally got the squeak. That's the one thing with this system is there is, compared to a straight axle, what do you got? 1, 2, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moving parts. And it does. You go through water and whatnot, and this truck develops a squeak. But it is still really fun. And, well, you can kind of see it here. This what takes the damage, the abuse, is that front piece. But with that little bit of ground clearance extra, look at the difference in those tires. So that gives me more ground clearance, but still, once weight starts going on there, it's going to quickly go that is hanging way too low. But it does make I do want to get the new one. So being that I only have the 2 element trucks, I may have to break down and get a third. Because I really like that Tacoma body. So, let's go to a quick history of the IFS. If you love IFS and you happen to be a Chevy guy, brag it up. Chevy basically released the very first vehicles with IFS. But Ford capitalized on it. Ford used IFS systems, 30 years later. Chevy touched on it, made one, said, look what we did, and then they let it drop. So 30 years later, Ford just grabbed it and started putting it on a lot of different vehicles. And boom. So basically Chevy invented it, but Ford became the master of the IFS system. So now in the comments, you Ford and Chevy guys, just fight it out. Just fight it out. So now, here we've got, can be quite capable against a straight axle. Let's just move the straight axle out of the way. And let's bring what, for me, started it all. This is the Tamiya CC01. See, this is the thing. So this truck came out, good Lord, I'm wanting to say back in the 90s? Maybe the 90s? IFS. Look at that. You've got a rear solid axle and front IFS. This came with bodies that the vehicle, not even close. So it came with a Wrangler body. It came with a Bronco. This one actually, I don't know why they didn't do anything in the front, probably because it was still in its infancy, but it's got the Junfak rear suspension on it because these things were notorious for the bolts working loose on the rear suspension, and you'd lose your bolts out in the woods. So This one, the other one I have is just stock, and this one's got some of the performance-y parts on it, but this is one of my favorites for just, this thing was great. So you had a rear, you could lock the rear end or you could unlock it. I've got, this one is locked. It's locked so much it doesn't want to turn. There we go. So it's got a rear locked end. The front didn't really have an option for it. Some of the newer ones I heard do. So you got your front gearbox up here. So on this one I didn't lock it, but on my original one, it's got a front and rear locked, which made a world of difference with this IFS. But it's so, the front was so tiny. You see how small those arms are, and then you compare them to a modern one, to how much beefier they are. Well, that's a bad example. The Tamiya ones are really beefy width-wise. The Elements are beefy width and length, and that's where you get your travel from. But boom, loved it. I love this one. I actually got this one for my grandbaby because it's got a skid plate on it and all this, but she didn't really drive it that much. She wanted the ones that Papa was driving. So we put that aside, and then we get to, I didn't grab it ahead of time, just for planning. So RC four-wheel drive, the Hero truck, which is a JD model. You can still get it from JD Models. This truck has this truck is the most scale of a lot of trucks I've ever seen. So this one has a very accurate IFS. But the thing was, it didn't get a lot of product support. But if any of you have the Hero truck, you can go to RC Addict, and he is having a big sale right now, and you can get a suspension and a body lift, which he has designed it so the geometry will stay the same. And I think that is terrific. I'm gonna probably buy it all, because with a body and suspension lift and some quick removing hubs he also has, I think I'm gonna touch into that just so I can, wow. He's been out driving and towing. He is filthy. You know, I'm gonna get that stuff because that is an IFS. You wanna use it off the road. You have to get a suspension lift, get a body lift. And his suspension lift, because that truck, the way the shocks are set up, are just like struts on a real truck. So he actually makes the little spacers that go in there to lift the front suspension. So that is a beautiful example of making the IFS work. Whereas Element did it from the get-go. And now I really want to get the IFS 2 to see what the difference is. So I hope this was helpful for any of you guys that are thinking about straight axles and IFSs. Get an IFS. If you just one in your stable, and then you go spend a weekend out driving it, and then you hit the comment sections on this video and tell me if you did not work harder than you've ever worked in your mind driving that truck. Put it through its paces, see what it can do, see what you can get it to do. You go to a crawling comp, or you go to crawling of anything with your buddies, and you bring your IFS out and they start giggling at you, and then you turn around and they're like, holy crap, that thing performs well. And you can say, well, you know, it took a little bit of work, but I feel I'm a better driver now because of the time I put in with this truck. And you know, I mean, Element's the only game in town right now but what a game it is. So thanks again for tuning in. Let me know in the comment section. IFS straight axle. Do you like IFS? Have you given it a try? Did you just write it off? Did anything I say maybe make you think about trying it again? And we'll have a conversation. So I will talk to you on the next one.